Dana Perino. She's supposed to be one of the most, like, reasonable and responsible Fox News hosts. We'll see if everybody in the audience agrees with that assessment after they see this clip.
Former press secretary for George W. Bush.
Certainly. Yes, you'll be surprised to hear she's a blonde woman. So unions are currently suing on multiple fronts. Federal workers unions, but also teachers unions are suing the federal government because Trump is saying that he just wants to get rid of the Department of Education. Elon Musk says he wants to just delete it. The implications of this are widespread. It would particularly affect the poorest communities among us who may not have the property taxes in the area where they're from to fully fund their public schools. That's where the DOE fills in the gaps. And also with children with disabilities, whether it be physical or learning disabilities, that's where this money goes towards. Musk is saying he wants to delete the whole thing. And Dana Perino on Fox News is backing this up and attacking in particular the unions who are trying to fight against it.
The other thing is, for example, last night on CNN, they had a segment that read, "We are 3 weeks into Trump's second term, and there are warnings that the U.S. is dangerously close to a constitutional crisis." But they've been saying this so long that it's become the boy who cried wolf. I just want to mention one other thing. I think there's a new nemesis here that people need to think about, and that is government labor unions. These are labor unions that are formed for government employees, and then they work against the American taxpayer who's paying their salary. So a lot of these lawsuits and things where they're going to try to gum up the works and slow things down go back to government labor unions, and people ought to pay attention to that.
And they also dominate. I mean, they donate strictly to Democrats.
100%.
And Richard has a lot of late fees on his credit card. I think we found that out.
No, well, I mean,
so just pay your monthly balance, Richard. It's going to be fine. We don't need.
There you go. Unions. Federal and public labor unions are the enemy. Does she feel that way about police unions?
No! That's different.
Waiting on that. That's different, I guess, guys. But the number of unions that are suing the U.S. Office of Personnel Management and DOJ include the AFL-CIO, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the American Federation of Government Employees. These are apparently all the enemies, the people that are career public servants that are a part of a union in the federal government. Moderate Republican, basically by the standards of Fox News, Dana Perino has said that they're the new enemy. So there you go.
Well, yeah, I mean, she can combine, the right and capital's maybe two biggest targets, like labor union, organized labor, and federal employees. It's been decades of trying to, antagonize and to make I should not antagonize, but to make the antagonists of our society, those types of groups. They want people to be cheering them on as they make working conditions in America worse, and as they make the public sector in America worse, because that's the way they'll justify doing it. That's austerity politics 101. You just make the civil servant the enemy because people are so alienated from the government that they have no idea what the civil servants do at the government. Right.
And then Elon Musk claims he's being transparent. There's nothing on this Doge website. Oh, I posted all to X.com. Dude is, according to Today, and his, Nazi Groyper minions are rifling through NASA at this current moment. And Elon Musk receives a bunch of contracts from NASA. It really is an incredible thing to see. The deployment of the word corruption as they do the worst corruption I've ever seen in my life. Nothing has meaning anymore. We saw kind of a preview of this with Lula down in Brazil, where trumped up corruption charges imprisoning him so a far right leader could ransack the government for his own ends. Except, I mean, this time it's they already had. It's the tech bros and their monarchical vision of a single unitary leader to dismantle democracy for something better, it feels like they already kind of ironed out the kinks and they're prepared to do it immediately, despite court orders. You know, these unions are suing. There was a judge that said they didn't have standing, even though this is like mass firing affecting this workforce. But hopefully that gets challenged in other areas, because of course it does. Like Sam yesterday, I wish I could have been there for this interview, but he had a federal worker on who talked about, like, she doesn't know if she's going to be fired. She doesn't know if she's going to be able to make rent, and that she got her master's degree learning about labor law because her entire life's goal was to work for the NLRB and for the government, and she was content doing that. And now, I mean, Musk just goes out there and goes, I'm going to delete it, because he doesn't want unionization at Tesla or in his other business ventures. It's incredible. It's incredible to witness, and not in a good way. And the normalization by the right. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and, you know, even with the lawsuits coming out, like, it still has at least partially the same intended consequence, which is that all of this chaos, all of this instability makes people leave the federal workforce. It will have the impact of making people uncomfortable in their jobs because they're being targeted by online Nazis and you know, at least 50% of the political system and Republicans, and they'll just get a different job, right? I think, you know, a lot of people in America don't understand really like what the government does or what function they do, and are just, you know, just generally very entitled when it comes to thinking that those things will just happen with a smaller government. Right. But, you know, people don't have to work for the government. There are other jobs they can take. It's a good job. That's what I mentioned in my last stream, that, like, you know, cutting down on government workers is a way to cut down on the middle class, you know, jobs that can still have you get like a retirable pension. But, you know, people don't have to teach your kids if they don't want to. They can just like take a different job somewhere, like where your kids, you know, won't be yelling at them in school. They don't have to work for and deliver your mail. They can get a different job. And Americans aren't necessarily prepared for a world where, like, you know, their fellow human beings just don't want to work in civil service because, like, look at who they're serving, like people who want them harassed, people who want them, you know, to like be like castigated online. Not to mention, yeah, with just like the fact that people have to pay bills. Like, I'm sure a lot of civil servants have to are looking into like jobs in the private sector for the first time, just by nature of the fact that, well, I have bills to pay. I can't be doing this like, you know, on just my largesse.
Yeah, right. And I think Musk or Trump, I forget who, has expressed the stated goal of putting these people back into the private sector.
Yeah,
that's what. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like they want labor surplus. They want to drive down the wages in the private sector. I think they've been very clear that wages are too high in the private sector. That was what the H-1B visa conversation was about too. It's like, you know, it seems crazy because there are so few jobs in America that you can work that will give you like a living like wage now. But they want to get rid of those jobs too. They like. I'm old enough to remember when they would tell you like, hey, if you become a software engineer out of college, you'll make $90K. They want to end that. They want that to be $60K, and they want your house to have no value anymore. So like, you know, they're trying to drive what little middle class in America, you know, still has into like abject poverty because it will make a more precarious workforce, you know, and it's, you know, a decent portion of Americans are cheering it on, which is frightening. You know, it's frightening to watch Americans cheer on like RFK Jr. becoming like, you know, the head anti-vaxxer. But I will, you know, remind a lot of people that, you know, this phase of like American population, like parroting libertarian talking points as though they serve the average suburban dad. We've seen this before. We've seen this in the crypto industry when the line's going up, everyone wants to have freedom of their own currency. Everyone wants to decentralize the banking, and, you know, regulations are just getting in the way of me earning money. Then when like the line goes down, people are desperate to call the government, you know, and the same thing will happen when people start, you know, people's children start getting polio. They'll be desperate to figure out like who they can call to like solve the problem because they're, you know, despite complaining about the government, still used to it generally working the way it's supposed to. And we saw that too with COVID-19 when people didn't want to get the vaccine because they were listening to far-right radio show hosts. When they were on their deathbed, drowning in their own fluids, they were begging for that vaccine. And that is what, and I mean, it's funny, but that is just what happens because Americans have been subject to 40, 50 years of neoliberal propaganda that tells them that they don't need the public sector.
Take your government can do. Hands off my Medicare.
My health healthcare. And
Yeah.
so like they believe that because they've been conditioned to believe that. And when that stuff goes away, we know what happens to them. They just some of them like cry out for the government to come back. And then like anyone who's been scammed, a decent portion of them just go away and slink into like I don't know, the cracks of society because they're too embarrassed to like mention like, oh, I got scammed by Elon Musk. I believe that this billionaire was going to do the right thing. The only people who will say that are like, people like Joe Rogan who like supported him publicly and then go like, well, I was tricked too. Like then you'll hear those people, but they won't be suffering from the same problems.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
you're seeing it right now. It's certain cohorts of what came together to be the winning Trump ticket. For example, right now, one of the largest cohorts regretting their Trump vote and being vocal about it online are like tech people of Indian background. You're seeing a bunch of them come up now, say like, "Oh, I think we backed the wrong horse. I think we made a mistake." It's like, well, yeah, no shit. I mean, they didn't even wait for Trump to take office before they were talking about sending you guys out of the country. I mean,
But
it is
like
unbelievable.
Binder, when I hear that, I'm sorry. Like, what other these are not? That's a different cohort of people who voted for him on economic reasons. But like, they voted for it. It's hard for me to think it's nothing but except like misogyny and racism. Like that. I mean, that's that. What
They're
else is the
not
explanation?
He's not talking about me. I'm different. I'm the exception. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
you see
everyone's the exception.
in every community.
That's neoliberalism. Like everyone's the exception. And also like we have to understand too, with the way in which our trademark leftist party, the Democrats, like argue about the economy, they allow a lot of these things to be mediated through the lens of the culture war. And then they don't even have a good response for that. Like the Democrats' messaging falls apart when people aren't doing well, and they don't even try to establish the basic, infrastructure within our society that would ensure that their message would have like the best chance of landing, because there's still like just tittering around the edges. The Republicans have no problem saying, like, acknowledging that people have less money in their bank accounts, and then they just tell them it's because women are in the workplace, and that because Black people are in the workplace, and because like we have immigrants in the country, and people can recognize that they do have less money in their bank account, and then they can recognize that women are in the workplace, and sans a real explanation that actually implicates like the real causes, which is capital. Then people are just going to like take whatever response that they have. So I understand like why some people think that it is so, the sexual revolution is causing their alienation, and not just the fact that they're having to work like 80 hours a week to make bare minimum. But like that's just a lack of messaging on Democrats' party side, which is what we're seeing now too. With like, we mentioned the activists like calling into the office for, I think it was Move On and Indivisible were calling, and they had the same question people had before the election. It's like, what are you guys doing? And that's a theme of the Democratic Party's failures. Like no one seems to ever be able to tell you what they're actually doing in any real sense, except for like a handful of meme accounts online that have like, a few like images, heavily credulous images. They go like, oh yeah, Biden passed all 90 of these bills. And it's like, yeah, but if no one can recognize the impact in their life, then either they have a significant messaging problem or they just didn't do enough. And so like, what's the point?
Well, they did have a messaging problem in the sense that Biden couldn't communicate for like the back half of his presidency
That's a
at all.
messenger problem.
I mean, that's literally a huge problem. He didn't use the bully pulpit. Yeah. That is in an internet age where you have to go viral and you have to get your message out there. Our president couldn't talk, and now there's no leader of the party, and Hakeem Jeffries is going and cozying up to Silicon Valley, and like we have to. Binder, I'll give you. I just want to get this thought out. Like,
yeah, go ahead.
If there's another election in 2028, the Democrats need to elect somebody who's going to go in there and take a hammer to the billionaire class, and like. Do you think use the way that Trump is using his presidency? Don't ignore the courts, but unless you can find an avenue to do something good for people, the destruction that's happening in just a month with our administrative state requires actual urgency that I'm just not seeing from the Democrats right now at all, save for a handful of people.
No, absolutely. I think, talking about messaging, it's a huge part of it. And Democrats consistently drop the ball. And you know what? Even with Biden, with his diminished mental capacity, that's not even the excuse. What stopped them from literally putting up big poster boards with Biden, showing exactly what they did and with graphics, making it very simple and have him just stand there. I did that. He doesn't need to talk. Literally, they would not, that's just a silly example I'm giving, but they do not get it across to the American people that this is what we did. And, there's plenty of stuff more they can do. Don't get me wrong. This isn't giving them a pass. But the good they do, they don't take credit for. And when they do take credit, it's in wonky political fashion. There's a skill you learn in storytelling as someone who, went to film school, where you got to beat people over the head with things sometimes. You have to write the script, the storyline for, honestly, what you conceive will be the stupidest members of your audience. Because if they're not understanding it, there's a good chance that other people won't understand it, and then your message is lost completely. And Democrats don't even do the bare minimum of getting that across, let alone angling that message towards people in a way that they could understand it. It's just a failure in all aspects.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just one last thing I'll say, and I agree, the Democratic Party does have a messaging problem, but I do think it's downstream from their ideological problem, and that is the result of them being neoliberals at the establishment level who are beholden to capital, and so oftentimes they are embarrassed by the fact that as politicians, they are supposed to be advocating for the public sector and what it can do best to alleviate the struggles of everyday Americans, how it can establish the certain tangible qualities in the future through the expansion and the creation of various administrative and bureaucratic agencies. But as neoliberals, they just don't believe in that stuff very much. They you have a few Democrats who really believe in that stuff on some across the board, and then someone a few key issues. But generally speaking, their ideology is one that makes them just not suited to advocating full-throatedly for a robust public sector, and that's what we need. And instead, they I think it seems clear to me that they are spending their time trying to recourt the billionaires who have left the party, because these billionaires understand where the average American is going economically, and they want to try to consolidate their wealth in ways that are going to be a little bit more aggressive than perhaps the Democrats are willing to do. And they're hoping that the American people see how bad Trump makes their life in the next 4 years, and then just vote for them anyway. And it's a sad state of affairs, but at least there are a few Democrats who, seem to be trying to whip up support for, I don't know, anything else.
Yeah.
Did you guys see this story? You might have even covered it. I'm sorry, but it is this morning in Popular Information about Trump's executive order leads to $100 energy bill hike for hundreds in Alabama.
I saw it was in our news packet. I had a million headlines, so it's hard to pick. But yes, I did see that.
This is a perfect example of listen, I don't know how these people voted. This is affecting people who are the beneficiaries of a grant that assists low-income residents with their energy bills. Honestly, based on that, it's a good assumption to think that they didn't even vote, honestly. But regardless of how they voted, the people should be out there, the Democrats should be out there highlighting this, saying, look at what he has done. Is this helping you with your groceries? Is this helping you with your cost of living? No, it's making things worse for you. And this is in Alabama. Honestly, the people who will be most hurt by a lot of what Trump is doing are people in red states. And and it's just complete silence. Even the mainstream media is not covering this. How is this not red meat for people who want to point out, which should be the Democrats, exactly what Trump is doing to the people who voted for him, may have voted for him, people who might be the neighbors or family members of people who voted for him. This is insanity that no one is touching this.
I know.
We mentioned it before, but it's take the Lake and Riley Act, for example, and it's not as if that's not a tragedy in a vacuum of an anecdote about someone being murdered. At the same time, the party that always likes to act as if it's such a galling thing to do to politicize a tragedy will politicize literally any tragedy to so as to galvanize their base / win something politically. What if the Democrats literally made an act for every single agency that was being either shuttered or defunded and made an act for a person who was, negatively affected by the shuttering of those agencies?
Do you remember when Representative Alan Grayson went on the House floor and said, I think that was him, that the Republican plan for healthcare is for you to die? What if the Democrats sponsored an act every time somebody died for lack of healthcare because they couldn't afford their cancer coverage?
Right.
There are planes falling out of the sky.
Someone in the Democratic Party hired Evan Vigeland for that one.
Yeah.
I mean, there are planes falling out of the sky 3 days.
There's like a plane crash every other day.
Every day.
It's insane.
It just seems like political malfeasance not to at least mention that. Like, you might say that, oh, well, Trump didn't do that. It's like, I don't know. He did, fire all of those people and freeze hiring and lower standards and all these things. Like, who's to say who did it? Like, the way they talk about immigrants, they should talk about the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Oh, also, why do they care about making that connection? They're not outright saying he's doing it, so they're not lying. Just say, why is this happening under Trump? Why could it be because of this? Like, the idea that they're not willing to get in the mud. Like, he's out there with Elon Musk saying, just lying about where your federal, the taxpayer money is going and what federal
He's saying that Biden did it.
Like, he's lying. They're straight up lying, and they're taking credit for things Biden did. They're talking about how they uncovered $2.7 trillion in federal waste or something like that, and then you find out where this $2.7 trillion number comes from, and it came from an actual audit that happened 6 or 7 months ago last year under the Biden administration, and no one's in the Democratic Party is even standing up and saying we did. They won't even take credit for things that they did that other people are taking credit for. This is ridiculous. Like,
It's
they don't
insane.
care. Like, just go on vacation, go away. If you're not going to even pretend, then go away. Like, don't even pretend. Like, let someone else step in. Like, I was telling people this, like I was saying, this was like one of my number one ways to try to convince people that you should just go out and vote for whoever the fuck the Democrats had decided to run in 2024 in those last couple of months before they even announced Kamala, is because you not voting for these people doesn't hurt them.
Yeah.
Like, they got to be masochists to still want to do this, because when they lose, they just go away on vacation forever. They just live a wonderful life they don't go to work. You're not putting them back to work. They don't sit there going, oh, I lost my position. Whatever will I do? I'm so hurt. No, they'll make more money than they were making in office, honestly. Biden got signed by a talent agency.
Well, the accelerationists thought that you could punish them, and they can't be punished because they blame the left regardless. But we learned this in 2016. It just doesn't work. But I just saw the time, guys. I'm so sorry we won't have time for calls. Righteous rant, though, by one Matt Binder there. We'll get to some calls tomorrow.
It's unbelievable. It's driving me up the wall.
It's driving me insane, too. I mean, I think Sam, we got us call Richie Torres and apologize for hurting his feelings, as Sam advocated for yesterday. He's very upset that his constituents are being very unkind to him by calling his office and telling him to resist Donald Trump. Stop harassing him, guys. If you are one of his constituents, you got to call and say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I hurt your feelings.
No, just mail him an Israeli flag. That'll make him feel better.
Right. Yes. Say, can I sponsor you? Can I get you a vacation? Do you want to head over to Tel Aviv? I mean, you may hear some children wailing a few miles away as they die, but at least you'll be able to get some R&R.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.